we have with us Mr. Cheyney, Head of Retail Media at Vistar Media and an internationally recognized retail media leader. He's going to deliver his presentation on the topic, Monetizing Your Retail Media Assets, a checklist for media owners, operators. He's with us right now as he walks onto stage. Please put your hands together for Sean. A huge round of applause. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the OAC team and for everybody here for having me. I'm going to probably get very excited talking about this topic, which is probably good for after lunch. But some of the things you're going to hear me talk about is coming from a different lens than most of you probably have. I'm newer to the out-of-home space, only having been in this space for about a year. But I've been in the retail media space for about 12 years. So that's the lens that I'm looking at this. When I first came over into Vistar Media, where I run the retail media business, one of the first things I did was interview about 35 retailers and just getting a better understanding for retailers all over the world and understanding how they're looking at out of home, how they're looking at it for the screens that are in their stores and how they're operating it today. And what I found is that digital out of home, as we're talking about it today, is very different than what we like to talk about as in-store digital signage. The two are very different. And having digital out of home in a store is very different than a screen on a billboard in a railway station, for example. So I'm going to talk through a few areas over here. There are good examples, there are some bad examples, there are some really ugly examples. We'll go through some of the technology examples and the objectives and some of the things that are different in the store that need to be considered in that checklist. And then delivering supplier value. That's going to be a theme that we're going to talk about that is very different when you talk about monetizing the assets in a store versus anywhere else. So retailers, just like all of us, sometimes make some really bad decisions. And what we see here is, in some cases, they do too many screens. We've seen this. There's a grocer in the US that bought 10,000 screens. They only have 350 stores. Far too many screens. And what ended up happening is they did it all at once. They didn't roll it out slowly. They didn't test. They just went all in. And as a result, it made it almost impossible to recoup their CapEx expense, but also at the same time, they got a year in, they couldn't even sell 1/2 of 1% of all that advertising inventory. So just way too many screens. So that's something that you need to think about for a variety of reasons, and we'll get into why that is. There's also the customer experience. And when it comes to the customer experience, again, there's another retailer in the US, and I don't know why 10,000 happens to be the number today, but they try to solve a non-existent problem. When you walked into the store, this is a pharmacy, they had an area with beverages, a cooler where you walk in and beverages. Clear screen, very easy. You see what you want, you open the door, you take it out. They were trying to solve a non-existent problem. They decided to get a little too cute. There's a company out there, and I apologize if any of you are either with this company or with a similar company. We can talk about it later. But it's solving this non-existent problem where they put a screen in the front that wasn't reflective of what was behind the screen. So you took glass, a very simple execution, very good customer experience, and they replaced it with something that made it difficult to understand what was now behind the glass. So much so that there's now a major lawsuit between those two companies. And then the last piece here is cumbersome tech. We'll talk about why this is a problem, but it's a variety of reasons. Mainly it centers on the fact that too much of the technology is manual, and it creates too much of an operational load and too much busy work. And it doesn't provide what agencies and brands are looking for with their media spend. So what's the checklist here? Here's some good examples. when you're planning your assets in the store, and this is going to be very different and might challenge some of the notions that some of you have when it comes to traditional out of home. So the first thing is, when you're talking about a store, you need to stop thinking about this linear model. That company, that retailer that bought 10,000 screens, they were sold on a linear model. They said if you have 2 screens in a store, you're going to make this amount. If you make 4 screens, you're going to have twice that amount, 8 screens, twice the amount of that, and so on and so on. That doesn't work in a retail store. When you have a retailer, they're trying to sell product. They're trying to make the cash register ring. No matter how many screens you have, it doesn't change the amount of eyeballs that you have looking at those screens. So ditch that linear model. Also, again, too many screens makes it almost impossible to recoup that CapEx in a reasonable time. And so what do you move to? So you need to move to a model which has that point of diminishing return, which is natural in a retail environment. So what that means is it's going to be dependent on a wide number of variables. Here are the things that should be considered. We need to think about foot count. These are these eyeballs that I was talking about. Again, all the screens in the world doesn't change the amount of people. And it's not just the people that are walking into the stores. It's wherever you want to put a screen. I know that if I put a screen at the entrance of a store, I'm going to capture 100% of the people. If I put it in a section that's far toward the back, maybe I'm only capturing 40% of the people. So that needs to be considered and built into that model, which is something that we do for our retail clients all the time. Dwell time, very common metric in out of home. That needs to be considered because it's different for different types of screens. In an entryway, you may have a 30-second dwell time. But if it's an area, and I love when I take my teenage daughter shopping with me, I'll take her to a beauty retailer and I'll watch her behavior, how she interacts with the products on the shelf, how she watches some of the screens. Well, dwell time in certain areas of the store for her are 3 to 5 minutes. That plays a big role. A lot more ads, a lot more different length of ads, for example, can be playing and for different purposes. Store hours need to be considered. Unlike a sign on the highway, store hours, many stores are not open 24 hours. So that needs to be considered as well. Store operations is a big thing. Store design is important, but also where electrical is. There's certain parts of a store that no matter how much you want to put a screen there, you just can't. And so that needs to be taken into account. Brand investments. If there's an area of the store just because it gets a lot of traffic, doesn't mean it's the right place to put a screen. You need to understand the brands in that area and are they investing in retail media? Are they spending media dollars? If it's a highly trafficked area and they're not spending dollars there, then it's probably not a good place to put a screen. But if you have an area with a lot of diverse brands and there's going to be competition, that's a great area to put a screen. And then also you have to consider the percent of screen time. Again, this is different than you're going to see in a traditional out-of-home location. And what I mean by the percent of screen time is retailers, their primary purpose is to sell products. So what they're going to do is they're going to hold back a certain percentage of their inventory for their own house ads, for their store promotions, maybe for their own brands, their own private label brands. They're going to hold back a percentage. Maybe that's going to be 25%, maybe it's going to be 50%. But you have to understand that so you understand what you're working with in terms of the amount of advertising inventory, which is going to play a role in the amount of revenue that's going to be able to be generated. When it comes to the operations, it's also considerations for the store zone strategy. I mentioned my daughter and her shopping behavior here. Yes, we walk into the store. We walk into the front of the store. That's the entrance. It's a great place for reach and awareness. It's setting the stage for the shopping journey. But then also there's endcaps. There's opportunities to make conversions near where the product is located. There's aisles, there's checkout. The area that my daughter spends a lot of time are these consultation areas. It gives an opportunity for a brand to have longer messaging, more interactive, more immersive, and more educational. And then there's the checkout. It's a great place for that last minute, especially impulse buys. We all know that when it's a retail strategy that happens all the time, but that's a great place for a screen for either having that impulse buy or maybe a finance company or something that is not sold at the store but is near to the store as well. So keeping in mind that different types of screens within the store are different for the strategy. Everything should be starting with strategy. For the longest time, and take that again, going back to that grocer that had the 10,000 screens, they were starting with out of home as a tactic and not as a strategy. When you start with a strategy, everything flows from there. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is in retail, there are a lot of stakeholders that play a role, and you have to make them all happy. I was fortunate enough last month to go to the advertising conference, the Cannes Lions Festival in France. And while I was there, I was talking to a large retailer, and he and I had been talking, and he was really excited because he was going into his organization. He runs retail media for the retailer he works for. And he was excited. He had been preparing, I'd been helping him prepare, but he was very prepared. He walked into a meeting of his executive team, and he was going to pitch them on the idea of why they needed to have screens in their store and the whole strategy around it. I saw him 2 days after that presentation when we were in France, and he was dejected. I said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "I thought I had thought of everything, but there was one stakeholder that I didn't think about, and he crushed the whole thing." And I'll tell you which one that is. So as we go through who are the retailers and what is the checklist for who we need to consider. So first, there's the merchant and the chief merchant officer. The chief merchant officer is concerned about driving value for their supplier brands and also creating opportunities, more opportunities for their supplier brands to invest in advertising. Typically in retail media, it's largely been on the digital side. And there's opportunities, but it's a finite resource. And so retailers are looking for new ways, new opportunities they can create value, and the store is a logical position. So how can we create value and make the chief merchant happy? By creating more opportunities and driving value for those supplier brands that are investing and selling their products at the store. Second, there's the chief marketing officer. Chief marketing officer is important. They're concerned about the overall customer experience. Putting 30 screens in a store, I've been in some of those stores. It's not the greatest experience. It needs to be well thought out with the right number of screens, with the right positioning, with the right messaging. Creative plays a big role there as well. You want to help drive discovery of new products as well. So how can you do those things to make the chief marketing officer happy? Next, there's the chief operating officer. Too many people forget about the chief operating officer. And this is the one that crushed the dreams of this head of retail media for this retailer, because the chief operating officer is concerned about what is the store logistics? What is the design going to look like? What types of screens? How's it going to affect sight lines when you walk into a store, and discoverability? How's it going to affect all those things? What about electricity? Has that been thought out? Is it going to be screens that are going to be placed in areas where electricity already exists? Are they going to need to create new electrical? What is that area? And then also, how are these screens going to get installed? Are they going to get installed after hours? What are those logistics, and how does that work? Very easy for the chief operating officer to be forgotten, and that would be a mistake, as this other person found out very clearly. So now he's had to go back to the drawing board and address all those issues where he should have thought about that up front. And then finally, but definitely not least, is the chief financial officer. We heard earlier this morning that, is this an expense or is this an investment? Well, the chief financial officer, for them to say yes, they need to look at it as an investment. They need to have a clear model, that point of diminishing return model, that not only shows how quickly they're going to recoup their capex for paying for those screens, but what does the ongoing operations look like and how much money are they going to make? They're looking to see what sort of incremental, what sort of dollars they're getting from the advertising, but also what sort of incremental return on investment they're going to get for their suppliers, for those brands, and how much more products are they going to sell. It's a retailer after all. And there are steps here, and this is a checklist that we like to use and advise retailers on when they're thinking about how are they going to deploy the screens. And we always advise retailers to start with software. And again, a little self-serving, Vistar is a software-based company, but we say select the software because if you start there, it's easier to move to the hardware piece versus the other way around. Secondly, you plan the store zones, like we showed before, with what are your objectives? What is the strategy behind everything? And then you select the hardware based on the strategy. Larger screens for the entryway, maybe smaller screens and an end cap, but all based on the strategy and whatever objective you're trying to create. Then you pre-assemble and provision, some of this not too dissimilar from traditional out-of-home. You're going to do quality assurance and testing. The logistics, the scheduling, this is where the chief operating officer and whoever's in charge of store operations plays a big role. You do the installation, you certify that everything is working correctly, and then you do a pilot. So I mentioned that grocer that did 10,000 screens. They didn't do a pilot. There's no reason to go all in. Most of you, especially if you're a brand, you wouldn't go in and just jump all the way in right at once. You'd test. And that's what we recommend retailers to do as well. Pilot. For a retailer that maybe has 1,000 stores, start with 100 stores. You don't need to do everything at once. You're going to get a lot of learning that you can build on and do it in phases. And then you can do your full deployment and have your support there. So it's also important that you start with the right technology. We heard from the gentleman before from Ernst & Young talking about the right technology and why that's important. What I mentioned before is that we have too many retailers. I mentioned before that when I started at Vistar Media, I interviewed 35 retailers just to get an idea of what their current operations were. And out of the ones that had screens in their store, I said, how are you managing that today? And they all had some sort of version of this. They said, well, we have Joe. And Joe comes in on Monday morning with his Excel spreadsheet. And he logs into the CMS, and he loads up all the ads, and it plays on repeat, essentially turning it into a digital photo album. And then next Monday, he comes in, he takes those ones out, and he puts the new ones in. And the problem is, it's highly manual. It doesn't take into account business objectives. It doesn't allow for things like triggers, whether that be sales or weather triggers or any other triggers to override. And there's a lot of inflexibility in how that works. So there's a need to go to an automated technology stack that's driven by business rules that are going to advance those business objectives. And so what does that look like? Again, earlier today, we heard about the need for a unified system that takes into account directly sold advertising, as well as plugging into the programmatic ecosystem on the digital side. Putting all that into a single system, into a unified system. We also recommend the same thing. Having that all in an ad server that's unified, that does all those things, that connects to the programmatic ecosystem, and then pushes back into whatever CMS or whatever hardware is being used is the best way to do it. Having that flexibility, but having all of that unified within a single platform does a lot of different things. First of all, it makes it easy and it pulls automation into the mix. So it makes it easier, takes a lot less work to be able to traffic all the advertising, be able to optimize it, but also allows for some of those triggers, weather-based triggers. If you're a beauty retailer and you want to show ads for waterproof mascara whenever it's raining, and you want that to take priority, great, it can do that. The other thing that a system like this with the automation does is it needs to have the ability to waterfall. A retailer has different needs. I mentioned before that they may have 50% of their advertising that is just going to be held back for their own purposes. Well, maybe that's their house content. That's always number one in the waterfall. Maybe trade budgets are number two. Maybe money they've gotten from ad agencies are number three, and so on and so on. Maybe you have the programmatic ads that are non-endemic to their stores further down the list. But it creates a waterfall that has flexibility that can be changed on the fly. That's going to be important. And how do we bring this together? Fixing the manual piece of it, you know, we just heard about AI and how AI is going to solve a lot of problems. You know, Daewon, when he talked about the from Poto, when he got asked the question about how is AI going to play a role. Well, I can tell you from our perspective, AI has played a role not just recently, but has played a role for a while, and we're not unique. Others in the ad technology have had technology to help with the delivery of the ads and the optimization for a while. And that's not going to change. But the whole purpose is to make things more automated, make it go smoother, be able to handle greater volume in less time. So moving from 100% reliance on spreadsheets into a automated system is going to be key. Easy reporting. Having a system that reports on all the metrics that are important to a retailer. Things like incremental return on investment, pre and post campaign to see what sort of lift you got, incremental share shift that the brand has in their category for whatever period they ran the campaign. That's all important, and it's important to have that. Also, having a good data ecosystem, being able to have that data fluency is important that you have in most automated systems. Also, API connections to other platforms. In retail media is a pretty broad ecosystem. There are a lot of online systems that people are using, whether it's Criteo or Epsilon or Cody, all these different platforms that are out there. It's important to have a system that has a good API structure that you can plug into all those systems so that the retailer has a single front door out to the market. Again, it creates more automation, it reduces the friction in the buying process. And then full creative and campaign approval controls. The only way for this to work is if the retailer maintains control. The last thing they want is something weird showing up in their stores that they didn't expect. So giving that ability and that control to the retailer to approve all those ads is key. Business rules that are aligned with objectives. This is crucial in a retail environment. So making sure it's aligning with all the retailer and retail media teams are important within the organizations. Creating that waterfall approach that I mentioned before so you can prioritize and then switch up the prioritization when you need to and be able to include things like triggers, like weather triggers as an example, or price drops, incorporating that in, and that can be incorporated on the fly. And then make it easy to and flexible to be able to modify those rules. And then finally, the measurement. Measurement's key. Nothing in any type of advertising category for a retailer, for a retail media team is going to last very long if it can't be proven that it needs to work. And it needs to be proven to all those stakeholders within the retailer, and it also needs to be proven to agency teams, to brand teams as well. They need to know that if they're spending money, that it's absolutely working. And that includes robust reporting that is either done by whatever platform you're using, or that platform has the ability to give you the ability to ingest that information into your own system so you can do the analytics yourself. But that's key. And then finally, any system needs to be able to meet the needs of all the folks in the retail media ecosystem. That includes the retailer, that includes the agency, and that includes the brand. And most importantly, it needs to work for the customer. And that means everything from the overall marketing environment to the ads and the creative themselves. And is it making the cash register ring? Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. We've got the questions ready, and the person who's going to bring them on is Mr. Satya of Laksh Media. Can you please join us on stage? Thank you so much for going through all those questions and choosing 3 of them. I'm sure it was tough. We've got 10,000 rupees that is brought to you by MSMA. That's right here. And the 3 questions are...
Hey, Sean, good one, man. Really loved it. Thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you.
First of all, great OSC. I think we are having a great day so far, and thank you so much, Vashant, Rajiv, Akash, and Dimisha, wherever you are. Big round of applause for them. Big round of applause for them, guys. I mean, they've been doing a fantastic job so far. We got around how many? 50 questions, and I chose around 10, but then I'm going to have 3. Well, Sean, let me go to the first one. Which one do I take? Hang on. Okay. This is a little, what do I say? This is a little one that is on Vistar Media, so I'll go on that first. Vistar Media talks a lot about data-driven buying, but how much of that data is actually actionable and trusted by advertiser in a fragmented DOOH ecosystem? That's Biver from I Don't Know. I think the team of I Don't Know has got some fantastic questions about Ricky, Raj, and Biver. Yeah, over to you. Yeah.
Okay, so this is about how is this trusted within the programmatic, programmatic
side. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Vistar was one of the first when it came to introducing programmatic into the digital out-of-home space. And my background, again, coming from the online space, programmatic is scary. There's a lot of things that comes through. Retailers really moved away from that online because it wasn't working. Weird ads were showing up. The biggest key for a brand or for a retailer for this to work is the controls. So as an example, in our platform, and all of our competitors have the same thing, is there's full creative control. So an ad comes in on the programmatic side, you look it over, does it have it has everything from the campaign to the creative. It has to be approved in order to be allowed to transact programmatically. So that's really one of the keys. The other piece in terms of the fragmentation is, again, our system and our competitors have something similar, is having mediation built into the ad server is definitely key. That way, a retailer can connect to us and Hivestack and the other SSPs in the system, get demand from all those, but have the mediation decide which ad should be shown, and then have all the reporting come through a single pipe. So you're taking fragmentation and you're consolidating it.
Bible, hopefully he answered your. Bible, hopefully he answered what you asked for. The second one is from Namita Alak Advertising. In today's unstable and dynamic market, smart asset monetization requires a balance of creativity, cost efficiency, and strategic resource utilization. So how brands should go ahead with this? Do you get this question, Sean?
Yeah, and I think, again, going back to the Poto presentation, I think that was right. It was just like a retailer shouldn't go all in with 10,000 screens, a brand shouldn't go all in with large amount of money before they test. Start with testing budget. The programmatic side allows you to do that testing very inexpensively, but even doing an IO-based traditional buy, being able to go in, the key is to get enough width in the campaign. So if there's a retailer with 1,000 stores, just like a retailer would do a slower rollout, the brand should do a slower rollout as well. Pick a region, pick a certain number of stores, urban versus rural, for example. Pick those, start slowly, and then work your way into a full-scale rollout.
Hopefully, Namita has answered what you asked for. And the last one, okay. Is the AI question, yeah. This is a little futuristic, if you ask me. Can AI-based dynamic creatives or shopper segmentation help increase revenue as per as per screen in the retail space? This Ritik Raj from Adam Morgan.
So that's a good question. This is actually a good place where AI can play a role. And having all the targeting, so that's where having a strong and diverse data sets in a platform is important from a targeting and a measurement perspective. That's key. But where the AI comes in is determining where that should be. If there's 1,000 screens, maybe you should only be on 100 of those screens. Which ones should that be? And using AI to make those decisions and do it quickly takes over something that a media planner would otherwise take a very long time to do.
Is that good? Yeah. Thank you so much, Sean. Fantastic.
I would say question number 3.
Which one do you think was the best one?
Question number 3.
Question number 3. Question number 3, please. Wherever Ritik Raj, please come on stage, please. And big round of applause for guys from Adonmoya. They asked.
Congratulations. I think today is your lucky day. Look at the smile. He can't believe that this is another time, another win. Congratulations. MSMA brings you this amazing check. Congratulations. Everybody put your hands together. Sometimes you just have the knack of asking right questions. Congratulations, congratulations. And then of course, we've got a memento that we'd like to present. Thank you. Congratulations, Ritik Raj. And requesting Mr. Satya to present this special memento to our speaker on stage. Please put your hands together. The head of retail media at Vistar Media, internationally recognized retail media leader, right here with us on stage, Cheyney. Thank you.